Last week, my son and I were surfing YouTube and we stumbled across this video from some, I don't know, financial guru making all sorts of promises. So I decided to watch it with my son as a bit of a teachable moment. And one of the highlights from the video was this moment where they did this really fancy cut scene and this individual boldly spoke into the camera about how if you made $1 million over 20 years, you would have only made $50,000 a year. But if you made $1 million a month, you could make $12 million in a single year. And we had a good laugh about it, but we ended up talking about it because what it highlighted was this guru, this expert, this person selling a masterclass in how to overcome and discover the infinite money glitch, wasn't selling financial or business advice. He was preying on vulnerable people by selling the promise of wealth and business success. And you might say, well, what does this have to do with anything, Christopher? Well, I'm Christopher Lind, and this is Future Focus. And this week, I'm closing out the Fortifying Organizational Fragility series to talk about something that is growing really fast right now, is just this ruse of the frictionless world that we live in, that AI seems to be powering. Now, week one, if you didn't catch that, was on the digital infrastructure we're building things on. Week two was on the way we care for and treat the employees around us that we so desperately need to be successful. And this week, I want to focus on this empty promise of frictionless, that we've somehow defeated the rules of business physics, because the cultural tide right now wants to convince us that we can create something from nothing. We can manufacture things from thin air and skip all the rules if we just buy the right course or vibe code the right app. And the reality is, gravity does not care about your LLM or your AI subscription or agent or app. Your inflow still has to be greater than your outflow for things to move forward. And some things still just have to happen a certain way. And I see a lot of people getting hurt on this empty promise. So I wanted to close the series on this. But before we get into it, if you found this series or my content in general helpful, it'd mean the world to me if you subscribed or you shared this with somebody you thought might benefit from it. Engage with it to help it get out there to others. If you want to say thanks, you can go to Buy Me a Coffee and look me up and say thank you formally. Or if you think the kind of work or the counsel or wisdom or whatever you want to call it I offer would be valuable to you or your organization, check out my website at christopherlin.co and see if there's something there that may be able to help. But let's transition into this, because the way the episode's structured, there's two things I really want to talk about, and then some real practical applications that I think everybody should do in response to this crazy world we're swimming in right now. And the first one is this. The laws of gravity still apply as much as everything around us is telling us that they no longer do. It doesn't matter anymore. We're being told the laws of economics don't come into play. And that's just not the case. You can build something, but if there's not a market for it, you're not going to sell any of it, no matter how cool of a whiz bang you create. And even the time and energy and effort that goes into building that whiz bang will still in some ways dictate your success. You can't just get around it because of, I don't know, some empty promise that you've been sold. And right now, so many people are getting distracted building artifacts. You know, they're creating an app because they've never coded before. And it's exciting. You're building something from the ground up, or seemingly from the ground up. You're manufacturing a new website. You've generated some new service offering or created some proprietary prompt that you either are convinced or you've been told is the next big thing. And it does give a legitimate dopamine hit that can feel like real progress, especially as you watch this stuff fly across your screen and you get all this artificial support and encouragement from a thing that feels like another human being, a real coach, a professional you've been convinced is more intelligent than every business expert on the planet. And that's dangerous because it can be like a drug and that it masks the real pain or the real, challenge ahead. And you can end up not even realizing that you've spent all this time and energy on something that creates zero value. And that's especially dangerous right now because more and more people are chasing after these myths in a complete and total vacuum. They're in an endless loop as AI continues validating and repackaging over and over and over again these foolish ideas. And people are going isolated. They're not around people who are willing and able to tell them what you're doing is a terrible idea. Nobody needs that. And this isn't just me talking. I recently had an example where I was engaged with somebody on something that they were doing, and I was coaching them around some of the things they were working on. And they went on to share with me how they've spent all this time building multiple different apps that were saving them countless hours on this different stuff. And I decided to push back on this, and I dug into it, and I asked, help me understand, how much time have you spent on these apps? And we broke it down about how much time they'd spent on this. And then I asked them to think deeply about how much time they actually spent on these things that these apps were designed to save them. And we did. We worked through it together, and we got to the other side of this, and they would have needed dozens of lifetimes to gain any sort of value from all 6 of these apps, let alone any one of them. And most likely the time they'd spent chasing after this stuff hadn't really accomplished anything in the end. And I think that's a really important thing for all of us to be thinking about, because there's a lot of things telling us, and a lot of people out there even telling us. So I don't want to just point the finger at LLMs. There's people that are doing this, that this idea that, the AI slop masterclass gurus are convincing us that you too can hack the system, when a lot of people are doing is automating a loss. They're building things out. It's the emperor's clothes, that aren't really going anywhere. And that's extremely concerning, especially when I think about this second segment, which is the fact that not only do these rules still exist, and to be clear, before I transition to section 2, I'm not suggesting that these tools are not helpful. I'm not suggesting that you can't shave some time off of your day-to-day, or that you can't, accelerate some of the things you're working on. But you still have to go through the hard work of things. You still have to have a sound business idea. You still have to be building something of real material value if you plan on doing anything with it. And that hasn't changed. That hasn't changed despite all the noise trying to convince you otherwise. But I think where this transitions to segment 2 that is especially sobering is that no matter how much you want to crunch the numbers and do the math, and maybe the 6 whiz-bang apps that you spun up with your Vibe coding app over the weekend may actually justify saving more time than you invested into it, the reality is we all still have the same 24 hours in a day, and we still have the same 365 days in a year. AI did not change that. This technology world we're living in has not changed the reality of that. And for those of you who don't know, I grew up in a funeral home, which has a profound impact on the way you see the world, because you recognize that you don't have as much time as you often think you do. And actually, in some ways, I think, not being exposed to that on the regular basis, and actually some of this craziness around it, is fueled by this idea that we're all facing some of these unexpected realities that are freaking us out a bit as we go, well, we don't, you're right, Christopher. We don't know how much time we have. And that's why I'm gambling on all these big AI lottery tickets. But that's not the appropriate response. And I think that's the danger right now, is as we're being sold these lies in many cases, but 2, we're faced with some of these really concerning realities around us. We are, in many cases, gambling it all. We're taking the rent to buy lottery tickets in hopes that we can buy a house. And that is not what the reality of our 24-hour real limits of our time should be doing. Instead, it should be making us relentlessly intentional with the time that we have. And it's funny because that same individual, when I had that difficult conversation with them that I did about these multiple apps that they were spinning up that were, on the going to save them all this time over the course of their life and all this other stuff. When confronted with the reality of this math, the real math that had not changed, and the fact that they had probably already spent more time automating these problems that didn't really exist than any sort of benefit they would get out of it, their default response was, well, maybe I can just monetize these apps. What if I put in the time and energy into selling these things? And going back to the previous segment, there was no merit to these apps. Trying to sell our wasted time on someone else is nonsense, and believing it is not the right path forward. You can't just keep bargaining this, pushing this down the line. And in many cases, that's what we seem so determined to do in so many different situations, rather than addressing the fact that, look, you've got 24 hours each day. You've got 365 days each year. So for every hour you're burning vibe coding a paperweight, you're surrendering that hour that could be spent on building a meaningful legacy, investing in meaningful relationships with the people around you, and working on durable work and building durable skills. And that is a ruse that you need to take seriously. And this idea that you can just pass off all this wasted time down the road, at some point, the bill is going to come due. Like it or not, it's going to come due. And at that point, you might not even be here to end up trying to explain your wasted math on all these different things you did. And I wanted to conclude this series on this because I continue to run into this over and over and over. And I understand some of the psychology behind it. I understand some of the marketing behind why this is taking off and why so many of us are getting pulled into it. But we've got to do a hard stop on this. Whether you're an organization making decisions about the strategic investments you're making in your technology stack, whether you're an organizational leader making decisions about how you're investing in the employees that your company run on that ultimately support the customers around you, whether you're a business, an individual, a professional trying to make decisions about how you show up at work and the way you invest your time and energy to fortify your resilience for your organization, or whether you're just an individual chasing the idea and the uncertainty of the world and hoping you can figure it out. This stuff really matters. And there's a lot of waste right now. And we seem to be accelerating and amplifying that rather than investing in the things that really matter. So my goal in closing this series out is to say, don't buy into this nonsense. Don't get hooked on this digital drug that is just going to leave you in rehab at the end if it doesn't kill you. And so that may leave all of you going, okay, well, fair enough. Fair enough, Christopher. Maybe you're like, maybe I need to find a new podcast. Hopefully not. And I'll get back to, the usual regularly scheduled programming now that we concluded the series. But I want to conclude with what can you really do this week? You've been with me through the series. Maybe the first thing is go back and listen to the other two if you didn't catch those. But maybe even you're just listening to this one and going, so what should we do? Well, before we get into this, I just want to remind you that AI is an amplifier and an accelerant. It's not a magic powder. And that can be both a really good and a really bad thing if you're not careful, because as an amplifier and an accelerant, if you put it on something that is well designed, well thought through, has, real legitimacy to what you're doing, it can amplify and accelerate that thing in a really healthy and meaningful way if you're thinking about it in a healthy and meaningful way. But it's also extremely dangerous. And I think that danger is compound. And that, one, if there's anything broken in that system, if what you're chasing is nonsense, it's a mirage, or there's broken process or broken logic in what you're doing, it can turn something really small that may have been a problem you could have easily fixed into a total catastrophe. But not even just that. If you've listened to the series on how some of this stuff compounds, you may have some things that are legitimately good, but because of the amplification and accelerant nature of what you're pouring on it, you can amplify and accelerate it past its point of good or past your point of being ready to handle it. And that can take a good thing and turn it bad really, really, really quick. And so as we close this out, here's 3 actions I would just encourage each of you. Find some time over the next week before we get to next week's episode and move back to kind of the regular scheduled programming. But the first one is do an objective opportunity cost audit. Like, look at the stuff. If you were to pay yourself an hourly rate, an honest hourly rate, don't say to yourself, well, I wasn't doing anything anyway. Well, that might be a problem in itself. But if you were to commit to it, if you were to invest in this, figure out, is all the time you're spending fiddling around, if you were to math this out in economics, would you still be in the black, or would you be in the red, continuing to chase after this idea that, it's just this next thing. It's just this next week of investment that I'll get out of the red? Because that's what the whole AI industry is doing right now. They're all banking on, it's this next big thing. It's this next big data center. It's this next big model advancement that's going to actually get us out of the red and into the black. And are you on that same track? Be honest with yourself, and don't ask AI. If you're building some cool ideas, if you're building some interesting things, show other people that you think might also think it's interesting and ask for their honest opinion on this. Get some feedback from real human beings who would be willing to say, I'm not seeing it. It's not there. And I'm not suggesting that 100% it's not. You'll find countless examples. And I know there's going to be people that go, yeah, well, what about the 0.01% who kept pushing? But the reality is, when you dig into it, there was something there. Even if maybe they didn't see it in the moment, there was something there. And I think way too many of us are bought on the promise that there is something there and there's not. So do that audit. And actually, because even if there might be something there, but you're pouring countless dollars and time into it on the promise it might be there, is it really worth it? And then strip AI out of the mix. This is the second one. Okay. Because again, going back to this, AI is this weird dopamine hit that you get. Strip AI completely out of the pitch. Does it still make sense? If you took all this tech and all this speed and efficiency out, is there sound logic behind it? And does it work with real pencil and paper? Because AI is not going to save it. If the only thing propping up whatever grand idea or solution that you're desperately working on is AI, it's a lost cause. And it's only a matter of time before you finally figure that out. And this is an opportunity to say, how long am I really going to chase after this mirage before I dehydrate myself out in the middle of the desert? And so give it a physics test. And if And again, bring other people into your physics test. As you're actually doing your audit, find out from these folks, what do you think? How much would you actually pay for this? Would you actually buy this app? And don't frame it up in a way where they feel pressure to tell you it's a grand idea, just like, because you can get people to tell you the same things AI will. But that doesn't mean it's real. And then the third one that really, it's like the cord cutters movement. Everybody was in such a desperate hurry to save money on cable. They went out and before they knew it, they had 3x as many subscription services as they had in cable costs before. And the same thing is happening right now. People are buying duplicate apps and tools and all these widgets in an effort to chase after this mirage. So not only are you wasting time and effort and cognitive thought and your durable skills on nothing, you're spending real money. You're spending real money on this. Real money is going out the bank. And I have coached multiple people who they would have had to make a lot of money to come into the black based on what was being required to stand some of this stuff up. And so if you're investing real dollars or whatever currency unit you're spending on this on a mirage, cancel it. And if you're looking at some of these apps that you have, you might want to slow down on some of this stuff. I continue to watch the core apps in my portfolio start to add some of these features that I used to have to go be pitched. You need to buy another AI service to create and do this thing for you. And more of the apps that I have are just building this capability into your portfolio. And so maybe you do still need some of these different subscriptions, but maybe you won't in 3 to 6 months. And so don't just make this purge or this opportunity audit. Don't just make it a one-time thing, because the reality is just because something looks like a good idea today or maybe a necessary app today doesn't mean it will tomorrow. And yes, you may lose something giving it up, but again, you got to do the math of, is in the long term holding on to some of this stuff and continuing to chase after some of this stuff, does it really add up? So please do that this week as we wrap this up, and go back, because we've untangled the rat's nest, the digital rat's nest we're building things on top of. We've talked about how we are being just conditioned to believe that we're moving into a mercenary and mining age when it comes to the value of human beings. And hopefully by the end of this podcast, we've effectively dismantled some of the frictionless fallacy. And hopefully I didn't shatter your hopes and dreams too much. But if I did, and it prevents you from driving off a cliff, then it was worth it. So please fortify your organization, fortify your life, because as we step forward into the future age, it isn't just about chasing more technology. It's about sovereignty and your agency. So please stop chasing the ruse. I'm Christopher Lind, and this has been Future Focused. And with that, we'll see you on the other side.